What?
You might be wondering how it is a 27-year-old young man like me is so comfortable speaking in front of a crowd. Well, it all began with one lesson I learned quite a while ago, and that's learn. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow members, and guests. Some 15 years ago, I was a happy and outgoing kid going into high school for the first time. I quickly learned that I was not one of the cool kids. In fact, I was often bullied by the cool kids, and more often by my friends. And over the next 3 years or so, I was put down so consistently and thoroughly by my peers that eventually I began to believe that I deserved the abuse that I got and the misery that I felt, and I became confused, lonely, and withdrawn. True story. One day, my best friend handed me a registration form and asked me to join his youth group. I didn't think much of it at the time. As far as I was concerned, if my parents were willing to shell out the money for me to join, I figured, what do I have to lose? So I joined. And I soon got to know the members, and they were quite a festive bunch. There was one thing about them that bothered me. They were just so nice, and I wasn't used to that. Frankly, I thought they were fake, and it bothered me. I soon realized there was nothing fake about them. I was just seeing what real friends looked like for the first time in many years. And the fake people in my life were my friends from school, and I soon left them behind. Then something real interesting happened. The leaders in my youth group began to approach me, and they told me that they saw leadership potential in me and that I should run for exec. Well, I didn't know what exec meant, but it sounded cool. And for the first time in my life, people were telling me that they saw something in me, that they believed in me. So that felt great, and so I ran for chapter leadership. And for the first time in my life, I voluntarily gave a speech to my peers. I don't remember much about that speech, but I'm sure I stumbled and bumbled. But then I won. And that year, for the first time in my life, I experienced what it is to be empowered and to feel empowerment. I learned how to plan an event. I learned how to write a release. I learned how to recruit a member. And I learned how to speak in front of a crowd. It was my first taste of leadership, and my thirst for it would not be satiated. The following year, I ran for regional executive. Again, I had to speak before a crowd. Again, I stumbled and I bumbled. But again, I won. That year, I attended my first leadership retreat up north, as well as my first international leadership conference, where I got to meet fellow leaders like myself from across North America. It was an amazing experience. That year, I learned how to set goals. I learned how to be diplomatic and professional. I learned how to be a respectful communicator. And I learned how to speak in front of a crowd. Finally, I became regional president, where I was the leader of an executive of 7 people. I was responsible for 4 chapters in 2 different cities. Once again, I had to do a speech, but this time I didn't stumble and bumble. This time I received numerous flattering compliments for my speech. That year, I learned how to run a meeting. I learned how to delegate responsibility. I learned how to plan and run a convention for some 60 participants. And I learned how to work with adult professionals. And it wasn't long before I was a young professional serving as regional director of the youth group, which had changed my life. Today, I am a lead facilitator for a company that focuses on team building and leadership training for young people, kids as well as teenagers. And I speak in front of crowds every day, some as large as 400 participants. I promote assertiveness, strategic thinking, active listening, and empathy. And I dream of opening up my own company someday where I could offer courses and coaching for adults so that I could share with others the wonderful discoveries that I've made over the years. My name is Oren Weintraub. I love leadership and personal development. I am a reader, an avid reader, I should say, and an aspiring writer. I play the guitar and I sing in a choir. I have loving and wonderful relationships with the people in my life. And most of all, I'm a happy man. And all of this I attribute to one important lesson. Learn from everyone and everything in your life. Every person that comes into my life has something invaluable to teach me. If I see somebody that is interesting, I approach them, seize the moment, and make them my friend. If a stranger approaches me on the street, let's say, for example, I'll become curious about that person and listen to what they have to say. And if I find myself working along somebody that rubs me the wrong way, we've all been there, I have learned that it is important to learn to tolerate our differences and in time come to see them as a friend too. I cherish every experience and I have no regrets. In my experience, there is no such thing as an unfortunate event. Every event that comes into my life is fortunate because it is either a success or it is an opportunity for learning. Either way, that is fortunate. And when disaster strikes, as it sometimes does, it is up to me to salvage what I can from the wreckage, use it to fortify my future, and move forward a wiser person. And who knows, you may become a decent speaker along the way. Mr. Toastmaster?